Welcome, everybody that has already joined us, and we're really hoping to have more people join us this evening. I'm your host for this APRU Indigenous Connection Seminar Series that begins with an amazing presentation today. And before we move into our main speakers, I would like to invite Noe Paniwai, Assistant Professor at the University of Hawaii, who is the co-chair for the APRU Indigenous Knowledges Working Group, and she will give us some introduction words tonight. And
thank you, David. E nā kini aloha mai ka velina ka lai hae a ka velona I nā paia o kuai helani. Hua wale a ke aloha I ka hopo. Me ke mahalo pū I nā kanaka au pau e pūlama ana I ka olelo aloha o kākou. I'm really excited to have you guys all join us today in this webinar. We've been excited as relations, as family here in this space, to really share and explore our stories across genres. For you to learn more about who APRU is and who this Indigenous Knowledge Working Group is, I'll turn it over to Thomas to tell you more. But I just wanted to start us off with a velina from all of Hawaii for all of you joining us here today. Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you so much for these welcoming remarks, Noelani. Let me just quickly share my screen. So I hope everybody can see the screen well. It's really a pleasure for me to welcome all participants to the kickoff of this Indigenous Knowledge Seminar Series. We are all excited to have so many participants here. And just for a brief summary of why we are here and what the platform is, I would like to give you a couple of introductory remarks about APRU. APRU, as many of you may know, is the Association of Pacific Rim Universities. My name is Thomas Schneider. I'm the Chief Executive of this association. And the association is really one of the largest and globally maybe most influential consortia of universities, comprising currently 62 leading research universities across 19 economies, across the entire Asia Pacific. On the slide here, you see a list of institutions that are currently members. And the premise why APRU was established was to create like a platform of collaboration and dialogue across this vast expanse of our planet to inform research and policies and to advance solutions around the big challenges of the Asia Pacific. Just to be a bit more explicit here, some of our major programs are informed by research, but their purpose is also to share knowledge about challenges such as global health or multi-hazards, biodiversity, sustainability. And here we are really a leading research network. We are about 40% above the global average in terms of research output for the Sustainable Development Goals. We are a very powerful research consortium. Taken as a nation, we would rank third globally after China and the US. So there's a lot of knowledge and research that we can leverage towards the big problems of the Asia Pacific. And on the left slide, I put here a yellow frame around the Indigenous Knowledges program or the network that is really a unique, and I can move on to the next slide, a unique sub-platform of the network that brings together a unique perspective to the challenges that we all face on our planet. On the left of this slide, you see the APRU Pentagon. That's a shape that shows you what informs our thinking, including the big challenges subsumed here under One Pacific, the big events, thinking about the University of the Future, fostering student engagement initiatives. But where I again highlighted Indigenous knowledge, we also are very much committed to enhancing diversity and understanding on the different cultures that make up our consortium across these 19 economies. And Indigenous knowledges and First Nations knowledges within the Pacific Rim have really risen to prominence in the last couple of years. We currently comprise of 14 member universities that are part of this network. And this reflects the fact that many APRU universities have world-leading departments and programs in the areas of First Nations, Indigenous, Maori, Pacific, Native American, or Latin American studies. Over the last 2 decades, more of these universities have also introduced comparative or international dimensions to their Indigenous and First Nations programs. So the APRU Indigenous and First Nations Knowledge Network is really a lens that we have created to focus on the big challenges of the Asia Pacific, such as climate change, sustainability, language preservation, education, identity, and others. But it gives the network and its members a unique approach to these challenges. Some of our universities focus solutions to climate change, for example, on collaboration with Indigenous communities, and try to infuse those solutions with the specific knowledge that these communities can provide. And the current seminar series called Roots and Bridges, APRU Indigenous Connections Seminar Series, is the outcome of a workshop that was held at the University of Melbourne in 2023. The University of Melbourne and the University of Hawaii Manoa are the 2 co-chairing institutions of this network. And so this today is the kick-off event for what is going to be 8 seminars from May until November that will give you expert insights into the field of Indigenous knowledges. And I'm very delighted today to see this seminar series being kicked off by Professors Linda Nikora and Te Kawehau from the University of Auckland. I wish the seminar series much success, and I hope it will be exciting and insightful for all of you to learn from our expert speakers. Thank you so much for attending.
Okay. Entering now the main part of this event, you can see for the people that are new to the activities of APRU, APRU, this is to make a long story short, one of the main events that we have decided to start this year after a series of meetings. And the common thread on the meetings that we have in this working group has been sharing stories about how each of our universities and each of the people that have participated into our meetings have dealt with problems that are common to university students, to researchers, Indigenous researchers. I'm not Indigenous, I'm Ecuadorian. I work with Indigenous people. And even though I can see that I have a very, I can claim that I have a very strong understanding of many of these issues, I have not lived those since I was born, as many of the people that are going to come and speak to us through this series. And I think it will be very enriching to see the connections that are among Indigenous peoples around the world, dealing with the same issues in different cultural settings, in different political settings, but coming to the same conclusion sometimes, and dealing with the same problems and the structures that they need to overcome to actually achieve what we probably all want, which is an inclusion that goes beyond just the fulfillment of a demand, of a requirement. It's the how do we as a society, as a world of people, enrich ourselves from the knowledge of the people that have dominated the face of the earth for many more thousands of years that the Western world has done it. So there's no political agenda behind this, but I really want everybody to feel free to write questions on the chat and we're going to pick up those questions and try to group them all at the end, and work on that scheme to try to answer as many of your questions as possible, because we only have an hour. So I'm not going to extend myself too much, and I've already asked Waimarie to forgive me if I butcher her name or butcher some of the things that I have to say about her bio. The same thing for Te Oahu. Please forgive me if I do something wrong. But Linda Waimarie has a very extensive curriculum that begins in psychology and ends as in the second part of her life, as I presume from what I read, dealing with how to sustain Indigenous communities and Indigenous students and the well-being of those people. What I want to say, because you can all read her bio in the main page of APRU and of our series, is that she's an amazing woman. And what has really impressed me a lot is the amazing way that the youngsters in her group will look at her and follow her and really wait for her command to get things done and solved. She might not realize of that. And I know that's a powerful woman way of doing things, but she has a very soft and yet energetic way of doing things. And for that, I admire her greatly. With how I'm very impressed, because it was today when I was reading that I read your title, and I would have never noticed in the meetings. You were one more of us joining our group and trying to be as fruitful as we were. And that's something that now creates my admiration for you, because you have a very humble spirit and you're ready to share your life experiences with us and help others, not just in your country, but around the world. So that will be my presentation of you, of the two of you. And we are very fortunate to have you launching this seminar series, and the floor is yours for the next 30 or so minutes.
Tēnā koe, David. He honore, he kororia, he maunga runga ki runga I te whenua. Whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Just simply saying, may peace and goodwill be amongst us for the time that we're together. So, ka nui te mihi atu kia koutou. To Adrian and Noelani for your leadership around the working group, and to Thomas for your introduction this morning. So I'm going to kick straight into it, because as David says, we only got a short period of time together. And I'm going to share my screen, and I hope you can see, let's just kickstart that. You can see the APRU logo on that screen and not my notes.
Yes, yes.
Cool. So I'm going to talk for around about 15-20 minutes, and then Te Kawehau is going to kick in and have a little bit of a conversation as well. Just by way of background, I'm Māori, here in the South Pacific, where it's cold and getting colder by the moment. We're entering into our winter. I'm from a number of different tribal groups in Aotearoa New Zealand, and I'm currently on staff at the University of Auckland, Waipapa Taumata. And so I'm really, really thrilled to be and a little bit intimidated by being the first speaker in the series. So I am going to try. I realize that we're talking across borders, across nations, across different universities, across different languages. So I am going to try and go slow because I know that there are different kinds of Englishes in the world, and my English may not be as comprehensible to you as other Englishes. So try and keep this really simple. and go really slow. So I thought, okay, what can I bring to the table to kick us off when we're looking at Indigenous knowledges within universities, Indigenous peoples coming into university settings, and the services that we actually provide to them, both as academics, professional staff, etc. What are some of the things that we need to keep in mind? So one of my background research areas is in the area of what's known as kapa haka, or Māori performing arts. So what I've titled this presentation is From the Stage, in terms of the performing arts, to campus, fostering Indigenous wellbeing in universities. Some of you may know or have experienced some of our performing arts, but I'm going to use the top part of the session to run through some of those things. Okay, right. Okay, so haka has been part of the Māori world forever. It's an ancient practice that's evolved over time, has been used for a great variety of things. For example, preparation for war, intimidating opponents, and those opponents may be enemies, or they may simply be people that you're in competition with. And it's also been used as a way to actually transfer information from one generation to another. Globally, haka was taken to the world during World War I, World War II, and given its military origins, it came as no surprise that our soldiers, part of the 28 Māori Battalion, took haka and performed it wherever the opportunity arose for audiences as well as for themselves. So this is the 28 Battalion in Egypt. We're a rugby nation and fiercely committed to supporting our national teams. And so the All Blacks are our national team. And what precedes every international encounter is the haka. And you can see it here performed probably in a packed stadium somewhere. So we've seen a transition from wartime into competitive sports and arenas. If you think our men look fierce, you want to see our women in terms of kapa and haka. Women were the last line of defense in terms of defending our homes and our children. And so don't think it was just men who did all the fighting. In our world, women were very, very much part of that equation and played an important role. But there are softer aspects to kapa haka, performing arts, and I guess as we came under the gaze of colonial visitors, if you like, and more recently tourists, we turned it on for them as well. And so you can see one particular group here doing that. Our performing arts were not just simply for visitors and tourists. They were something, and continue to be, a practice that we just simply enjoy for ourselves. And so there's a genre of performance that has trended online, which are called the wedding haka. And it's not unsurprising that haka is done as part of weddings, birthdays, funerals, anywhere we gather. It's something that we actually share and we do for each other. And it's not just for the young and body beautiful. It's for all ages. So I'm planning at the moment a stand up with my own tribal group next year. It may take us a little longer to prepare for such performances, but it's something that can be enjoyed right across the lifespan. I put this image up of ballet, opera, choirs, military routines. If you threw all these genres together on the stage, you would have what is known as kapa haka, because all these genres are part of the kapa haka performance, if you like. So I assume you all know what opera, choirs, etc. are all about. So just imagine all of that merged onto the stage in a 20-30 minute performance, and that's what you would have. So kapa haka for Māori is a merging of a number of genres of performance. A couple of years ago, we were approached by the organisation that caretakes kapa haka in Aotearoa. It's called Te Matatini, to support them in a bid for funding. And so what they had to prove was the value that kapa haka brought to Aotearoa New Zealand, and then further afield to the globe. And so we set about doing some research with Māori, and we asked simple questions about, what is it that you value about kapa haka, Māori performing arts? What we ended up listening to were people telling us about what they valued about all things Māori. And that's a really, really important point to understand. Every culture has its portals or windows into worlds that are often not seen in daily life. We all lead very modern, contemporary lives. We don't live in, the stereotypical grass hut. We don't do that anymore. But those typical grass huts to us can be actually beautiful, meaningful buildings that are imbued with knowledge that has been created from cosmological times. So kapa haka is a portal. It opens onto the entirety of the Māori world. So what we thought was a very, very simple question ended up being a very, very complex question. So cut a long story short, we ended up with a truckload of qualitative information that we had to organise some way. And I think we spent about 6 months organising it, and we got it down to four categories, moving this along. And it's what we call the Hine Te Rehia framework. So if there is a deity that whose domain is the performing arts, it's this person that's called Hine Te Rehia. So what does kapa haka mean for people who are performers, who are supporters, who are simply part of an audience? The first point I want to make is that kapa haka provides a place to stand. So if you remember back to the earlier images, particularly the ones of, I guess the women are the best exemplars, and the way in which their legs are firmly positioned on the planet. So Tūrangawaewae is simply a place for one's legs to rest, but in the kapa haka genre, it's all about balance, and it is a military stance. It's a basic human right for us to be able to stand on the planet and be nurtured by the planet. It's a basic human right. And so what participants were telling us is that, okay, kapa haka gives me a place to stand with pride, to be unashamedly Māori, to gather around me a sense of community, to sit well with other people, and to be able to walk the world with confidence as Māori. So that was the first dimension. The second dimension is a Mātauranga or learning dimension. Kapa haka is all about the transfer of knowledge, and it happens in a very, very intense, often very short period of time. So simply learning songs or chants, we're transferring language, giving people the opportunity to hear, listen, use Indigenous language, giving people the opportunities to understand Indigenous concepts, the opportunity to revisit and re-know our histories, the opportunity to sit with the universe relative to our cosmological origins. Lots of learning occurs within a kapa haka context. Ihiihi is all about expression. And it's not just simply about talking. You know, as human beings, we use the totality of our bodies and capacity to make utterances and sound. We use that totality to impress ourselves on the world. And so it's about being proud of the ways in which we're able to articulate our lives, articulate ourselves as Māori, particularly in contexts where we are living our lives in the face of dominant majorities. So the majority of Indigenous peoples are non-dominant majorities, and we live our life in the face of those dominant majorities. So it's about being proud of being able to express ourselves in uniquely Māori ways. The fourth component is about Hauora. So Hauora is basically the winds that give us life. So the air we breathe, the breath we take, the winds that give us life. And so kapa haka is an extremely physical activity. And so it has huge well-being effects. But people in the study were really keen to impress that it was just not about us as humans in terms of our own well-being. Our well-being comes from standing on the planet and being part of ecologies. And so looking after ourselves also means looking after the ecologies that we're part of. So that was the framework that we landed on. And now I'm just going to transition into, okay, well, if we were to imagine reshaping a university institution, then what would be our starting point? So I guess the first thing that I want to say is that the starting point should be the place at which Indigenous peoples view the world. That should be the starting point. So in the Māori world, there's many frameworks, models, etc. This is just simply one. But I think it is a helpful one because it opens the portal on all things Māori. So if we use this to actually now consider, okay, what does this mean in terms of potential pathways forward to ensure that the experience of Indigenous peoples is a positive one within our institutions. So Tūrangawaewae, a sense of community. Okay, so that would mean we should design spaces that foster a sense of belonging and community, where students themselves feel proud of their identity and culture. So they need to be welcoming. Students need to see themselves, both in the environment, but also in the human environment as well. So that has implications for building structures, but also the staff makeup as well. Incorporate elements that affirm Indigenous identity, provide opportunities for community building, etc. Mātauranga learning. Our curriculum should offer pathways to Indigenous knowledge. Now, I say this, I guess, tentatively, because those pathways are not necessarily the property of universities. Those pathways need to be negotiated, permissions need to be sought with respect to accessing knowledge and then creating learning environments that are culturally relevant. Pedagogies, you know, the lecture theatre and 1 to 100, I don't think that's a good pedagogy for anyone, really. I think that we can be much more creative in terms of creating learning opportunities and learning encounters that will not only benefit Indigenous peoples, but students more generally as well. Ihiihi, expression. We need to move beyond the essay or the multiple choice test. There are many, many ways for people to communicate with each other, many ways to test knowledge, acquisition, competencies and competence. And again, it's about creating powerful platforms for that learning and that expression to take place. And again, coming back down to Indigenous peoples are often a non-dominant group. So the creation of those different platforms need to be defended. So you can't just have an Indigenous person come into an institution, you say, get on with your job, which was my experience in terms of coming into the institution. Support needs to wrap around Indigenous staff as well as Indigenous students. And the last one is Hauora wellbeing practices. This has implications for student services, campus life more generally, and realizing that there are different pathways to wellness and different ways of maintaining wellness along the way. So I think I want to conclude there, and I actually want to pass to Te Kawehau, who will do what she does well. And then I think we'll come back to questions at the end. So tēnā koe Te Kawehau.
O, tēnā hoki koe, Waimarie o tira kia tātou katoa ko hui nei, I rungi tēnei kaupapa nui, whakahirahira, huri noa tēnā tātou katoa ko ai tēnei kōrero ana, he uri no Ngāti Hau, no Ngāpuhi, no Ngāti Waihoki, e mihi ana, e mihi ana. Kia ora everybody, it's lovely to be here, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you also to the group who have initiated this series of talks within the Indigenous Knowledge Network of APRU. It's heartening to see this work going forward. I'm just going to make a few comments riffing off things that Waimarie has said today. I wanted to, sort of the sort of framework that you presented reminded me that maybe as a starting comment that Indigenous knowledges aren't just about content or information or data. They're not just knowledge, they're also ontological. So it's sort of ontological and epistemological, together. Ways of knowing and knowledge are indistinguishable, I guess, from ways of being and thinking and doing. I think that's kind of a distinction we would make at the outset about thinking about Indigenous knowledge. And then I was thinking about Hauora. That's one of those big concepts that Waimarie presented to you on earlier. And that first word of Hauora is, as Waimarie has said, is a wind, but it's also an animating force, a relational force, which underpins the health of kinship systems. And those kinship systems in Māori thinking are framed within this idea of whakapapa. So that's the kind of dynamic, moving kinship system, if you like, of the universe. And that includes humans and older than human others. So when we're thinking about how well are we, or how well is the ecosystem of the university, if you like, we can bring the logic of Hauora, of well-being from a Māori concept, and we can trace how the way well-being shows up, or if you like, doesn't show up in the networks of relationships that form a university community. So in those movements, exchanges, and flows of relationship, we can show where the system is unwell and where restoration might be, considered. And so that is the kind of ongoing project of, I guess, of the university and indigenizing practice for the university in order to create a context in which Indigenous knowledge can actually flourish. As Waimarie has said, the university is only one site of the production of knowledge, and maybe, not the main one. And knowledge is being produced and lived out in many other settings of our Māori worlds. But if we also think, as I think we do in Aotearoa New Zealand, that, we had our nation develop differently through the kind of, colonization period, shall I say. Had mutually beneficial relationships been the kind of foundation of the way nationhood progressed, then universities would look different, but they would also be our institutions, and therefore they would absolutely be places in which Indigenous knowledge would thrive, be produced, and experienced by our tauira. So, yeah, I mean, I think, just to conclude, that kind of Indigenous approach to transformation of our institutions, in order that we can create a context in which Māori ways of being, thinking, doing, learning, producing knowledge can flourish, is the project. It's a big project, and it's probably a forever project. It's not like, we're going to realize it in a decade or two. But, I think we feel positive about that work, because particularly because if you approach it using Indigenous thinking and logics, then you feel a bit happier about it. Because it's got creativity in it. It's got meaning and feeling, and it's about all sorts of things. I think it's not it's not just about structural change or power dynamics and politics, but it's about the quality of day-to-day relationships, the affective, so it is about culture and the vibe and the feel of a place, but it is also about systemic and structural questions and tensions as well. And so I might just conclude by saying that, you know, an indigenizing process or creating the context in which Māori students, staff, knowledge can flourish isn't, you know, just about the politics of Māori recovery or reclamation. It's also about all of us. It's about, you know, in Māori we have a word that's not often found in other languages. It's tātou. It's an inclusive we, but it's not we, you know, who are the same. You know, it's a tātou that can hold diversity and multiplicity, but it's also an idea about the we. And so we're really keen to move away from simple ideas about how Māori are included in the university, you know, the inclusion and diversity model, where, you know, the university helps us, the university gives us a hand up, the university kind of parents us, if you like, to an idea where we are really foundational partners in this project, and we belong and identify with the institution in a way that is a tātou. So I'll just shut up now and let's have some questions or conversation. Kia ora tātou.
Yeah, if I could just make a comment on the slide that's on the screen. So when we're talking about Indigenous spaces, this is a particularly Māori Indigenous space. I know that there are Indigenous spaces on campuses popping up all over the world, but this is ours. So it's called Waipapa Marae. And if you look at the logo on the left, you will see that the University of Auckland underwent a slight name change, now known as University of Auckland Waipapa Taumata. And I guess, you know, the marae has been standing for maybe 30 years, Te Kawehau, at least 30 years now. And I'm very, very privileged to have my office just to the left of this particular building, which means that our teaching pedagogies can slide very, very easily back into the Māori world. So you can see carvings. All of these carvings tell a story, and they're portals into our world. The other point that I want to make is that when you nurture an Indigenous environment, it makes it that much more easier to appreciate other points of diversity. And so in Aotearoa New Zealand, we are the largest Pacific city in the world. And so post the building of Tāne Nui Ārangi, which is the name of this particular house, another house was built, which is just to the rear of this building, which is known as the Whale Pacifica. So it's a way of embracing all the Pacific nations that are present here in Aotearoa, and even those that are yet to be present. And I think that perhaps we can rename this one the APRU House. It feels like an appropriate renaming. I'll have to go and see Jemima, but happy to go to questions at this point.
Well, Waimarie and Tika Wehu, I want to thank you both for this very interesting introduction to what we want to accomplish with the seminar series. And it looks like an audience is a bit shy. So in view of that, Adriana is asking or compose a question based on some of our discussions. So I'm just going to go and read it. What advice can you guys give us to universities, students, teachers, and individuals that are at the beginning stages of creating an inclusive ecosystem within the universities? And in order, I want to add to what that question is, it seems from what I've heard from the both of you that you're part of this evolution of how this whole process has happened in your country. So if you were with what you know now at the beginning stages, how would you do that? What would you think it is? Kind of like, I don't know, there's no magic recipe here, but what should be some of those main spices, those main ingredients in that recipe for those that are beginning?
I'll let Te Kawehau take the lead.
Oh my gosh, such a big question, and also deeply contextual. You know, I think that, you know, there's lots of things that attend to a question like that. Like in our context, for example, we've got one language, one Māori language. I think that's a huge benefit for us, because even though we might be trying to revive dialects and so on, we're not trying to revive 300 languages. We have a kind of pan identity, you know, with multiple levels of identity. Some are you know, small kin group, larger kin group. Others, you know, we have a pan kind of Māori identity as well, which is very useful politically and for kind of, you know, making political rights claims, if you like. These are positive things. We're in a small country. There are a few, you know, there's two degrees of separation between anybody. We're 17% of the population, which is not huge, but also it's not insignificant either. So these are some of the contexts in which I think that we've made gains, some of the gains that we have. But you know, I guess what I would just say again is that you know, we don't want to be just another pressure group, minority group who are kind of making rights claims, you know, to a system, whether that system is the university or the government. We might inhabit that space, but we, you know, are really digging into the idea of indigeneity as a kind of guiding set of ideas, logics, and practices for the way in which we go about, you know, we go about change. And I think that is like crucial. And I feel that, you know, having grown up in, you know, in Māori politics, I suppose, that there's a lot of productive potential in the way that Māori approach political problems, questions, and relationships. We are very good at bridging polarizing positions. We're good at diplomacy. We are good at a whole lot of things that our nation needs and the world needs. And I think so Indigenous people across the board, you know, can dig into that thinking and bring that forward into all that they do, which is, you know, really to transform systems and wherever we are.
Just adding to that, and just emphasising the importance of what Te Kawehau has said. Absolutely. I guess I found myself in my mid to late 20s thrown into the university context as an academic and told to develop what is known as a kapa Māori psychology or Māori psychology. So I imagine that quite a few Indigenous academics would find themselves in that situation where they're just simply told, develop it, teach it. You won't have any textbooks, unlike your colleagues who can just simply go to the library and pull it off the shelf. The knowledge repositories are not the standard ones. They're usually contained in chant histories, cosmology stories, etc. And I guess my own journey has been a process of just having mad ideas and trying things. You won't have a lab. And oftentimes for Māori, the greatest teaching lab are either our carved houses or the natural environment. And you probably won't have a budget to help you take your students out there. So where do you start? And my thing is just start small, keep it simple, and just keep celebrating the cumulative gains along the way.
Well, we have now the audience is breaking with questions. So I'm going to try to merge those two. How can we revitalize the pedagogical practices of well-being in spaces where they're open for few Indigenous students in a way that those activities are not seen just as folklore? And the other one is somebody who's taking conservation and restoration ecology at a graduate level and is interested in how can we motivate the youth, especially those from Indigenous communities, to practice and preserve their culture and heritage that is being threatened by the fast-paced modernization. And I will probably move that. How do we promote the students to actually do that within the campus when you don't have a campus that it's usually focusing on incorporating? I guess it might be sounding like a self-criticizing of my system. We're good at incorporating the Indigenous students into the university, but we have not incorporated the university into the students yet. So these two questions to me are kind of like driving towards that. How do you bridge? And yeah, I shut up. Let you talk.
Those are big questions, and
I know we have a new set. We can break this into another two series.
Yeah, it's a big question. I hope that subsequent speaker will actually pick up on those more in detail. But I guess from Māori worldview, humans aren't separate from our environments. We're part and parcel. And we're related to the insects, the bats, the fishes, the birds. They are all part of our genealogical connectedness. So when we cultivate those connections, that connectedness and that sense of Hauora, the winds of well-being amongst the totality of our ecosystems and our relatedness, then we will do things very differently and understand them differently.
I mean, I think I think some of the response was in Waimarie's slides, the need for spaces where Indigenous students can gather and be familiar with each other and be culturally familiar. There's just so many things that are part of that project. Sometimes we'll say that having Indigenous signage is just window dressing, but that I think all those sorts of things, big and small, actually contribute to shaping environments, institutional environments where people can kind of see themselves and see themselves positively and see themselves in valued ways. So, I mean, anything in any of those directions, the presence of Indigenous languages, the presence of obviously increasing numbers of Indigenous staff so that students can kind of see themselves in the institution in terms of the people that are teaching them. I mean, none of this is new to anyone on this call, on this screen, but as Waimarie is saying, you just got to keep chipping away at it. And it's not easy, but I think you take support and, you know, from networks like this. I think networks like this can really help us globally to share and to maintain our kind of, you know, our resolve and our kind of putting our best foot forward in these spaces. No silver bullet, fortunately.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're running out of time. I do want to again thank you both for being first. Is usually hard, so we were all a bit nervous before the beginning of the seminar, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy with the results and your contributions. And I want to invite our audience to invite other people that couldn't attend to watch the recording, the Zoom recording that will be available on the APRU webpage. And please don't forget to come to 1 month from now. We will be having our second conference, and we have one each month, so that's our goal. And I know we said that we're beginning with 9, but hopefully this will be a longer series, and we can continue having these voices.